everyone, and welcome to another episode, a very festive episode of Teamwork a Better Way. I'm Christian Napier, joined by my seasonally dressed co-host, Spencer Horn. Spencer, how are you doing?
Feeling festive, Christian. Good to be with you.
Good to be with you. Good to be with you. I've been under the weather for the past couple of weeks. Had a really
I
nasty
know. I'm sorry.
Still kind of getting over that. So if I sound a little weird or whatever.
I mean, weirder than usual?
Yeah, weirder than usual. Yeah, if the weirdness meter kind of starts redlining, then you'll know. But I'm super excited. This is a great time of year, and we have an amazing guest. And Spencer, I would love for you to introduce him to our audience.
Yes, excellent. We have Shawn Moon with us today. Shawn, and I've gotten to know Shawn over the last couple of months as part of a mastermind group that I am just so thrilled to have the quality of individual like Shawn be a part of. And he is someone that has years and years of experience. And over the past 30 years, he's worked with clients across the globe, from Fortune 500 companies to government organizations. And he's bringing his firsthand experience in leadership and management, sales and marketing, and consulting services to help them achieve remarkable results. And he has a deep knowledge and robust experience to really inspire and help leaders get the best out of their people and really start to execute with effectiveness. Currently, Shawn is the CEO of Zerorez Franchising Systems based in Linden, Utah. And this is an organization that brings the power of safe and environmentally sound solutions to hundreds of thousands of homes across the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom. And prior to that, he was the executive vice president of Franklin Covey. I know some of our listeners may have heard of that organization, but as that executive vice president at Franklin Covey, he had the responsibility for Franklin Covey's worldwide direct offices, as well as the company's speed of trust practice, which I'm so excited about. It's really a big part of our theme today. And sales performance practices and customer loyalty practice. And he founded Franklin Covey's Government Services Division, and for several years led that company's efforts with local, state, and federal agencies. So there's so much here. He's written multiple books. I know you're writing one right now that I'm so excited about, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that. But the books that he has written are Leading Loyalty, Cracking the Code to Customer Devotion, Talent Unleashed, 3 Leadership Conversations to Ignite the Unlimited Potential in People, The Ultimate Competitive Advantage, Why Your People Make All the Difference, in 6 Practices You Need to Engage Them. These are things we talk about all the time, Christian. We should have had him on sooner. And then Building a Winning Culture in Government, a blueprint for delivering success in the public sector. So in addition to running all these companies, he's just writing books. And I know in his personal life, he has all the time in the world because he doesn't do anything else. I know he's super busy volunteering in his community and church. Oh my gosh, I don't know how you have time to do all this. But these books have been published in multiple languages across the world. He's on the faculty of Franklin Covey with their Executive Leadership Week. He's a highly sought-after speaker. Christian, he's been on the stage with people like Seth Godin, Olympic medalist Michael Phelps, and Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak. Highly in demand as a speaker. He was previously a principal with Mellon Financial Corporation. I could spend like the rest of our time talking about that. Just to end with, he was 2024 finalist for Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year. And most importantly, which, we always put this last, Shawn, and I do it on my profile, but he and his wife, Michelle, are the parents of 4 children, 7 amazing grandchildren. And that's really some of the best accomplishments ever. Don't you agree?
I would agree with that. That trumps everything.
It really does. Yet sometimes when it comes about, to the consulting side, they don't take those into account. But I have one more thing. This is the first time I've ever done this. And Shawn, I kind of let the cat out of the bag, which maybe I shouldn't have done. But I did a little internet search on Shawn Moon. We did some AI, sleuthing to find out a little bit more about him. And I have 2 pages of data about him. I'm just going to read a few highlights. Education, you attended Brigham Young University, yes. Core
Yes.
values, it identified. Now, I don't know if you've listed these, but it identifies your core values as leadership, innovation, integrity, community, and excellence.
Hmm.
Does that sound about right?
It sounds about right.
Now, you may not have written this personal mission statement. It created a personal mission statement based on what you said out, which is publicly available. To lead with integrity and innovation, fostering a community of excellence and trust in the service industry. And I know
That's pretty accurate.
so. A couple more things. When you communicate with Shawn, here are three suggestions: focus on outcomes and efficiency in discussions, recognize and appreciate achievements and contributions, and engage in strategic and logical conversations. And the words that are going to fire him up are innovate, achieve, lead, strategize, execute, inspire, motivate, transform, drive, excel. And there's so much more. I'm going to send this to you. How cool is that? We can find so much in the internet, Christian.
And it's all true. That's what's amazing about it.
If it's on the internet, it must be true.
Exactly.
Abraham Lincoln once said, "The trouble with finding quotes on the internet is determine which of them is accurate." That's quoted by Abraham Lincoln. So, I mean, you got to use some judgment.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, if Honest Abe says it, then of course.
Yeah, because I think he invented the internet.
No, that was Al Gore.
Shawn, I just want to start off. Tell us how you got started in this, really in this business. You are someone that is all about motivating, inspiring, engaging people, building trust. How did this start? How did you get on this journey, and what was the why?
Well, first of all, so honored and privileged to be here with both of you. Christian, I'm sorry you've been feeling a little bit under the weather. I have too, and it's like it won't go away.
Yeah.
So if my voice sounds a little wonkier, I have to cough for just a minute. Please bear with me. And can we just all take a minute and congratulate Spencer for the best haircut I mean, I'm feeling a little shaggy right now, and I got to take care
Yeah,
of this.
I didn't get
So
the memo.
today,
I should.
you got some work to do, Christian.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
I had the privilege of working with closely for 25 years or so with Dr. Stephen R. Covey, and I was exposed to Stephen and in some of his work early on in my career. Candidly, I was still in college, and I had always been drawn to this sense of leadership. And what was it that, I mean, this question that I think is worth a lot of deep contemplation. Of all the choices one could make in life, why would one choose to follow you, or why would someone choose to follow me? What is it about what I bring to the table from a leadership perspective, or you or anyone else, that would say, I choose to follow that person? And leadership is a tricky thing, right? Leadership sometimes, and often, we attach it to the sense of I have a position. I'm currently chairman, CEO of my organization. So by virtue of my title, I must therefore be a leader, right? And that's just simply not the case. People always have their choice. And some of the great leaders that you think about in your life, in your experience, may not have even had the title. But we would look at them and say, that was one of the great leaders in my life. So I've always been drawn to this concept of leadership, and what is it that causes someone to say, I will follow that person. More I could say about that, but I was exposed early on to Dr. Stephen R. Covey, and was privileged to work very closely with him for a number of years. He passed away about 10 years ago, and still miss him. What a brilliant, magnificent thought leader, but person, and everything that you would want someone who spent their career teaching leadership to model and to emulate. He did. And the fruits of his life are just, they're out there for everyone to see. And what he has created has changed the world, literally. So I've had the privilege of doing that from the very beginning of my career. And over the course of my career, have been on every continent of the world except for Antarctica. So if anyone's going, I'll carry your bags, and we'll stand on the ice, and we'll have a conversation about leadership, so I can claim every continent. But leaders and executives, and government officials across the world, and studying and reading every article I get my hands on, and talking with literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of leaders. It's been a real joy and a real privilege for me to be involved in this. I've just sort of always been drawn to it.
So it sounds like that early experience really also inspired you, and that question really motivated you
Really did.
to work that for yourself. If there was, I mean, you talk about leadership is just not one thing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's so huge. I mean, so many people want to distill it down to this thing or that thing, but it's such an. I mean, we could spend days and days just talking about the one thing. What is one aspect of what Dr. Covey taught you, that helped people really want to follow you? That, I mean, if you could work, that you would make that as maybe your top priority
Sure.
as a
Boy,
leader.
that's a tough and unfair question.
It
And
is, I
Spencer's asking me that because last week I asked him that question, and he's like, "Well, that's a loaded one." I mean, you're right. Leadership is not just one thing, and I'm always a little bit, when someone comes up with a quote that says leadership is, and this nice little pithy thing, because leadership is not just one thing, it's all the things, right? For example, I have to be a leader in my own life. I have to have clarity around my values. I have to be clear on who I really am and what I really stand for, and what I want to achieve, and am I leading my own life with vision? Every organization creates a mission vision statement, and we can talk about why they do that, but am I doing the same thing in my life? Stephen Covey used to talk about climbing the ladder of success, and we climb rung after rung after rung, and all the blood and sweat and toil and tears that goes into that, experience of climbing the ladder of life. And finally, we get to the top of the ladder, only to realize the ladder's leaning against the wrong wall. And we'd never taken the time to say, when all is said and done, I want to be here and not here. And my experience is so many of us don't pay the price to bring that kind of clarity, right? And it's an evolving thing. But then you have to climb the rungs of the ladder, not just put the ladder on the right wall. You got to manage your life, and live your life according to those things that are most important to you. And then you show up to work, and you've got relationships. You've got to make sure you approach those relationships in a mutually beneficial way, and then communicate effectively, and recognize that you're different from me. And because you're different from me, maybe that's the source of our greatest strength rather than our source of greatest conflict. And so you have that, and I got to balance my life in the process of that, and then I've got to organize how work gets done. I mean, even as I talk through this, it sounds exhausting. And I've got to make sure at some point, Winston Churchill said it, at some point in our lives, each of us is figuratively tapped on the shoulder to do something unique and extraordinary and fitted to our talents. And he goes on to say, and what a shame if that moment finds you unwilling or unprepared for that which would otherwise be your finest hour. But at some point, we're tapped on the shoulder to say, we like what you've done as an individual contributor, but now we'd like you to do it with a group of people. And so now we have to get results with and through other people that requires them to change their behaviors. And imagine how difficult it is to get results in your own life when it's just your own behaviors. But what about getting results that require other people to change their behaviors? And then you don't just have one team, you have multiple teams. And as you grow and progress, you've got to get results with a lot of different people, and the level of complexity and the number of stakeholders just changes. So it's a lot. Right.
Oh my gosh.
That's the setup to answer your question.
I am tired just listening to that.
I know it's exhausting. Leadership is hard. And it's not just one thing, but I will say, and I love this quote, and again, I'll quote Stephen Covey, because this isn't everything, but it's really one of the most significant things in my own experience. He said, leadership, I added the word seeing, so I'll take credit for that, but he gets credit for the rest of the quote. Leadership is seeing and communicating another's worth and potential so clearly they begin to see it in themselves. In other words, a leader is someone who sees greatness in others. And I believe to my core that everyone has greatness in them. And I don't care where they're from, or what their economic background was like, or their social background was like, or what language they speak, or what accent they have, or where they went to school or didn't go to school. Really, every individual has the potential for greatness. We may not be seeing it. It may not be manifest yet. It may be latent, but it is there. Right. And so when he says leadership is seeing and communicating another's worth and potential so clearly they begin to see it in themselves. I love having that conversation with with leaders, because it's like every single one of you at some point in your life and your career, someone saw something in you, maybe at a time where you didn't see it in you. That certainly was the case with me, where a leader said, I see something in you. Now I have to live up to their level of expectation, even if I'm not quite there yet. And because I do, everything in my life has changed, right? There's a lot about leadership, but for me, if I have to distill it down to one thing, Spencer and Christian, it's probably that the ability to see and communicate the worth and potential, the greatness in others, and communicate in such a way that they can manifest it themselves.
We could talk so long about just that. Christian, I
Yeah.
knew you got stuff on your mind.
Well, I do. We can. There's a lot to unpack there, but I want to come
Mm-hmm.
back to what you said originally, which is uh, you saw Stephen R. Covey even while you were in college. You
Yeah.
had this question in your head: why follow a leader? What
Yeah.
makes it follow? What is it? That is it being able to have that connection and know that the leader is wanting you to help discover and untap your potential. As you went on your journey of leadership, how did you uncover the answer to your fundamental question, which is why follow this person?
Yeah. I think there's a lot to that. I mean, think about your own experience and think about leaders that you have followed. And if they were to call you today, let's say that maybe they're not still with us, but by some stroke of good fortune, they were to call you up and say, Christian or Spencer, would you do this for me right now? I mean, what would you drop? What wouldn't you drop? What wouldn't you just drop to say, yes, of course I will. Of course. And so for me, there's kind of like three things that sort of weave into one powerful thread. We want those leaders who have, the bedrock of integrity. And you feel that when it's there and you feel it when it's not there. Sometimes it's hard to put your finger on, but that's one. Number two, think about leaders in your life that where you just admire them. Wasn't there something about their motive or their intent that you felt? There were no hidden agendas. There was just a purity about, maybe it was, this is the job to be done. This is what we have to accomplish. And we rally the troops, and everyone is so focused with such clarity around that. Or it was around you as an individual, that you knew that you were safe with them because their intent was not self-aggrandizement, but their intent was to accomplish the mission, or their intent was to lift and elevate you. And you feel that. And finally, and this is all sort of tied into that same thing, don't you find that a sense of vision is so powerful? You can listen to a lot of leaders and they'll talk about tactics or strategy, but when they start to talk about what is possible as a team, as an organization, as an individual, there's something about that vision, and leaders that have a vision for the job to be done, or a vision for you as a contributor or as a potential leader or as a future, whatever it is, there's those three things really kind of, Christian, for me. That's what inspires me. When I feel those things coming together, it's like, all right, I will follow that person, right?
I I've talked on this show many times about the person that I chose to follow, who was, I consider, a great leader. You may even know him. The world is smaller in
Yeah,
it just seems so
yeah.
small. But his name was Kelvin Cullimore Sr., and he was the CEO of two publicly traded companies. I worked for him out of college, and for my book, I've been interviewing him, and I asked him, just what was his leadership and management philosophy, and he said one thing. He said the divinity of the human soul is
Hmm.
paramount. Everything he did was about understanding and that's very similar to what you said, that Stephen said, that you're seeing greatness in people. And so this may seem strange in a business setting, seeing people as divine, as children of a divine being. Wouldn't we treat people differently and see their potential as really infinite? And as you start to, as a leader, help them see that then in themselves, then what I heard you say is that they're almost those expectations. It's the Heisenberg principle, right? You look at something and you create the outcome based on those expectations. It's called the expectancy theory. You expect them to behave a certain way, and they actually start to do that. When I was growing up, we had this story of Johnny Lingo and the 8-cow woman, right? And that person that nobody wanted to marry, but Johnny
Nobody
Lingo.
else saw. Yeah.
He saw something in her, and to prove that, he gave Mohana's I don't remember her name, Mohana's father, the 8 cows, and that was just unheard of, a wealth, and she became that person because he saw that in her. And once you express that, people want to live up to that, or they begin to believe it themselves, don't they?
They do, and I think that we need to recognize and be really, really cognizant, aware that as leaders, and again, I'm sort of separating the sense of leadership versus position, right? Leadership is a
Right.
choice more than a position, but we're leaders, and we hope everyone sees themselves as leaders, and we may be in a position where people see us and recognize it. And one of the things that I think it's important for us to acknowledge is that everything we do communicates something. Everything we do communicates something, whether we know it or not. What time we show up, what time we leave, who we engage with, how we solve problems, how we don't solve problems. Everything we do communicates something. So if that's the case, we should be very, very deliberate in our communications. And sometimes it's in the passing moments. I have a friend, a woman named Meta Norgard, who's a brilliant consultant and author, and she wrote a book called Touch Points with the former CEO of Campbell Soup. And in this book, she talks about that as leaders, we have these moments, these touch points, and we should always be aware that we have the opportunity to lift and to engage. It was in Mexico City not long ago, and I was giving a speech. There were about 2,500 people in the audience, and this is part of the World Business Forum, and I kind of brought up this concept of leadership is seeing, communicating, and others' worth and potential. And this gentleman on the front row raised his hand. It was a little bit, for those of you who are older, will remember Welcome Back, Kotter. Remember Horshack? He's like, oh. So he's picked me. So I said, share with me your story. He said, 35 years ago, I had an interaction with my leader, and it wasn't very long, but he said, you're doing this, and I would encourage you to see this opportunity and go this direction. And I said, well, that's interesting. That's 35 years ago. What kind of impact did it have in your life? He said, well, it changed everything. I said, well, that's interesting. Now, what did he say? And he kind of talked about how long was it? It was just a few minutes. I asked him, if you were to find this gentleman today and asking you, hey, you remember 35 years ago, you and I had this conversation, do you think he would even remember it? And he said, probably not. But then I asked him again, but what kind of impact has it had in your life? He said, it changed everything. The whole trajectory of my life and career and my life went from here to here. It just changed. It just elevated. And I think as leaders, we have that potential and that responsibility. And going back to your point about this sense of divinity, I mean, if we really believe in sort of the greatness of humanity, every individual, every person, regardless of all of the other outside factors, that there is greatness, there's extraordinary opportunity, potential there. C.S. Lewis, and I won't give this quote verbatim, but he said something to the effect, especially you and I have talked about this, that we don't really know who we engage with every day. If we really knew what the greatness that individual or those individuals, were, we would feel, just be deeply humbled, who they really are and the privilege that we have to have the associations. So what that means for us as leaders is that we have a tremendous sense of obligation to help bring that greatness forward.
So I've got a question based on everything that we've discussed, and I agree with everything that's been said, and it's amazing.
Mhm.
My question is, how, as a leader, do I develop this ability, the desire, the capacity to actually view others in this light? Yeah, because for some people it might come naturally, but for others, maybe that's not part of their DNA at the moment, right? And
Mhm.
so we have to surface that as a leader. I've got to be able to develop this ability to actually put on these divinity lenses, for lack of a better term, and see people in a new light. How do I do that? Like, how do I go from, I was in a leadership training. I work for the state. I was in a leadership training yesterday, and the common types of vocabulary that are used when you're talking about human resources are resource style vocabulary. We are widgets in a factory, that we are an expense line, uh, and we are not seeing people as you are saying. We need to be seeing them to be effective leaders. So how do we change our mindset so that we can actually get this vision of the inherent worth of individuals?
Boy, Christian, that's the question, right? It is interesting. You talk about in a for-profit organization, you think about where your people are categorized on the P&L. They're not categorized as assets, are they? They're categorized as liabilities. They're a cost. So, I mean, even how we categorize our people, it's like, do you really see who you've got and what's there in the greatness and potential? I think you use the word mindset, and I like that, and you use the metaphor of your glasses, and you think about, Christian, what you see through those lenses, and the answer is everything. Everything that you see is influenced by the lenses through which you view it. And that's one of the big challenges. Like, for example, if I take my fist right here and I can see myself on the screen, so I can see my fist, but if I don't have the screen, I can see my fists, I can see my fists, then right about there, I can't see them, right? They're in my blind spot, and we have these things on our vehicles that help account for our blind spot. Um, but I'll often ask groups, how many of you have been sitting here today? How many of you have been sitting here thinking to yourself, oh, I wish I could see what was in my blind spot? Not one person thinks that, because the brain fills it in the gaps. The brain has this amazing capacity to fill in all the gaps. One study I read said that at any moment in time, we have 11 million inputs to our brain. So as the three of us are sitting here having this conversation, we have 11 million inputs that our brain is having to filter through, and then it has to organize it and give us the ability to focus, and it does that by filling in the gaps, right? That's really helpful, because we couldn't live if our brain didn't do that. We can't process 11 million inputs in every given moment in time. But the downside to that is that it creates perceptions. It creates a mindset or paradigms or mental models or mental maps that sometimes are empowering, but sometimes they're very, very limiting. I think one of the hardest things that leaders do is to challenge the lenses through which they view themselves and others. And I added themselves because there's that moment in the morning where every one of us wakes up and we stumble into the bathroom and we look in the mirror, and what do we see? What do we tell ourselves about what we see? Right? What lenses are we viewing that individual? And sometimes we make judgments about that person that are just simply based on incomplete data and not enough information, or sometimes it's inaccurate. And we certainly do have that experience with other people. How many times have we had an interaction with someone and you're like, wow, that's not what my initial reaction or my initial impression of you was, but you've really expanded my view, right? Christian, one of the hardest things we do is put on a different set of glasses to challenge the view that we have of the world. There's a lot more to that. How we approach our fellow human beings. What do we see when we see them? And it is hard. And sometimes these paradigm shifts, these mindset shifts, happen like that. But
Shawn, that's
sometimes they happen over a long period of time, right?
it's called the fundamental attribution error. We typically
Yeah,
make judgments
yeah.
about people based on how they impact us, thinking, oh, this person came late because they don't care. No, they don't do things to you. People do things for themselves. They had a problem with their daycare or something like that. It's not that they don't care, but we judge them based on the impact it has on us. Yet we judge our actions based on our intentions, not our impact. But we
Absolutely.
judge everybody else by their impact on us, not their intentions. That's the fundamental
And
attribution
sometimes
error.
we have that initial attribution and we hold on to it, with this
That's
death
the
grip
that's the
because
bias you're talking about.
I know who you are. For example, you did an AI search of Shawn Moon before this call, and you shared here's what Shawn Moon's electronic fingerprint is,
Right.
and I get hit by a bus, you can kind of recreate me with all the data that's out there. The question is that really what lens? I mean, that's a set of glasses,
It is,
right?
yeah.
But is it accurate? And if it's nice and flattering, then we'll say, of course that's accurate. Of course that's accurate. But what if it's not? What if it came up with something that was different and we say, well, I know who you are, right? I know who you are. And you put on the set of glasses
That
and we
happened
have
to
this
me.
attribution.
That happened to me. There was a company called Crystal Knows, and it based on all the things you put out on social media, it came up with a profile that was wrong. It made me nicer than I actually was because my personality wasn't as nice as all the stuff I put out on social media. But what I'm hearing, Shawn, is it starts with, I think, what Stephen Covey said, the private battles, right? We have to start with us and develop. We have to be the kind of people that have integrity. So we're not faking it, because in those moments we don't always need to be thinking about, okay, how am I going to impact this person for the next 35 years? No, it just happens because of who we are.
Yeah.
And that's something that takes time to develop, and it takes I mean, I think that's really what I want to understand next is we're listening. People are listening to this show saying, yes, I've heard that I need to see the best in people. I need to have a positive impact on people. But how does that then impact the bottom line? Because that's where all the investment, that's where companies listen. If I'm a VC, I really don't care about all the touch and feely crap. I'm looking at your balance sheet, and I want to know if this is a going concern that I'm going to invest in, or I can make this happen. Yet we're talking about things that may not immediately impact the bottom line, or do they?
Of course, and where there's no margin, there's no mission, right? And
Right.
we all have to be accountable and add and value. So, I don't want to portray this as sort of soft, fluffy stuff. Leadership is hard.
Yeah.
Leadership is hard. And you said something that I just want to underscore that I just so passionately agree with, that it takes time. That this idea of becoming a leader is a lifelong pursuit. I just spent some time a few weeks ago. I was involved on a board, and we went to Florida, and I was with three other gentlemen who I came away from that experience and said, this is evidence of a lifetime's dedication to being an effective leader. It was really, really interesting to see how they had honed and refined and focused and overcome challenges and made mistakes, but gotten better over a lifetime of effort. Um, so it's not easy. It's hard. And I brought up this notion of changing behavior. I mean, think about an experience in your life where you've done something that you're proud of that required you to change your behavior. When I ask people that, I'll say, was it easy or hard? And they'll say, well, it's one of the hardest things I ever did. But you look at what you were able to accomplish. Are you proud of this? It's one of the things I'm most proud of in my life. But it was hard, right? Well, what if your job is to get results that require other people to change their behavior to do the same thing? It is hard. Leadership is tough. There was a study done not long ago by the Conference Board, which is a research firm out of DC, and they did it was a global study of 1,000 CEOs, and they asked the CEOs, Mr. or Ms. CEO, what is the thing that keeps you up at night? Which is kind of a silly question, but it's actually also quite profound.
It's a popular
And
question.
It's a popular question, and they said, "Well, we got to grow, of course." But then when they dug a little bit deeper, said, "But we've got to grow through our people, through our leaders, through our culture." And this notion of what your people, really, it's manifest in their culture. Culture is what the majority of the people do the majority of the time. That's at least one definition of it. And Deloitte at the same time did a study, and this was interesting. These were their words, quote, they said culture issues, leadership issues, people issues, they said exploded onto the scene, rising to become the number one challenge that leaders face. Well, this is my experience. I'm going to go back to a question that Deloitte poked me and all leaders with in just a second. But my experience is that this is hard, but you find, and the challenge would be to find any annual report from any organization anywhere and see if it doesn't say somewhere in there, our people are our most important asset, because 100% of them do. When I ask people that question, they all laugh. It's like, yeah, I've never read one that didn't say something in that. So then here, go back to Deloitte. Deloitte pokes us on that. They say, we all recognize it. We all say it. So why, they ask, if we all recognize it, if we all say it, why do so few do anything about it? And the answer is, it's hard. It's difficult. I think it was great basketball coach Adolph Rupp who said, men never fell on top of the mountain. They had to climb there step after step after. Do you have that quote somewhere in your office? I love it, because it is, there we go. The person on top of the mountain didn't fall there. I love that.
I've got two of them. It's actually Vince Lombardi, I believe.
Okay, well,
But you know what? Maybe he copied it from Rupp.
maybe you got it from Adolph Rupp. Either way, the point of it is that it's just plain hard. And unless you recognize that and are deliberate, intentional about doing it, we won't. You think about great leaders that you admire in your life, people who have accomplished a lot and they've done it in the right way and all of that. And they've sacrificed, and but they get to the end of their life and they look back and it's like, wow, they did a lot. And they did a lot because they actually had more time and opportunity, right? No, we all have the same amount of time. It's what we do with that time. It's what we do with that opportunity. And so when you said it takes a long time, it does. It is a lifetime pursuit.
Shawn, I was just on a flight from Minneapolis to Las Vegas on Sunday, and the flight was full of people from Deloitte. And I texted my friend here in Salt Lake, who's a Deloitte manager and lives in Alpine, and I said, do you have an all company meeting? I took a picture of the person I was with. I said, do you know this person? And the whole company from all over the United States. I don't know how many millions of dollars that is to fly everybody to Las Vegas to have this all company meeting, but it's a lot of money. And that's because people are that most important asset. If they weren't, we wouldn't spend that kind of money developing and caring about them and recognizing them. And so they're doing it for this holiday meeting that's going on this week right now. So
it's great.
Well, dang it, I have so many more questions. Christian, go. I'm hogging the time here.
I'm just absorbing all of this amazing information and knowledge and wisdom. And Shawn, I appreciate you so generously and freely sharing it with us here today. I just feel like I'm going to school, like I'm taking a graduate course in leadership.
Oh, goodness.
I think it's amazing. One thing, working in the public sector, which is a recent thing for me. I just joined the state of Utah government in March of this year. And one thing that afflicts the public sector is the image of public sector employees. And so one of the things that in the state people are trying to do is make sure that our employees understand their worth and they're important. And and can really take pride in the work that they do and the organization that they work for. And I can't remember who the author is, but there was a theory about organizational pride, and the contributing factors there are the competence of the organization and the virtuousness of the organization. When I think about leadership, uh, I think those traits can be applied to the leaders of these organizations, right? If I have a competent and virtuous leader, then I can feel trusted and safe and have confidence that we're going to be heading in the right direction. And so I'm curious to hear from your standpoint. Uh, a lot of the stuff that we've heard, uh, the bedrock of integrity, purity, no hidden agendas. Uh, you know, these are kind of on the virtuousness side of the scales. But there are specific skills that I think people need to learn as well to become effective leaders on the competent side of things. So, uh, thinking about the craft of leadership, I like how Steve Young talks about quarterbacking as a craft,
Mhm.
especially later in his career, he started to view it, this is a craft. Uh, and I like thinking about leadership that way as well. It's a craft that, as you say, it takes a lifetime over all of our lives. You know, um, what do leaders need to do on the competency side, not just as a SME, subject matter expert or domain expert, but actually the the knowledge of what it takes to be an effective leader, the skills that I need to develop to be an effective leader. What do we need to do on that side? I see the virtuousness side with seeing the divine potential in others, being a person of integrity, uh, you know, not having hidden agendas, having a purity on the virtuousness side. On the competency side,
Yeah.
where do you see we really need to establish a solid foundation?
I love the question, and candidly, it's easier to talk about the virtuous side. We think about leaders, and when I ask people what does leadership mean, they'll often say, "Well, it's integrity. It is, motive and intent." And all, yes, I passionately agree with that. But I'll give you an example. If you and I, Christian, are great friends, and I'm a world-class podiatrist, really good at my craft, but you need me to you have a heart issue and you need someone to perform open heart surgery, would you want me to do that? It's a silly question, right? But I say to you, but Christian, I'm a really good podiatrist. Well, you wouldn't want me to do that because I don't have the skill set, I don't have the technical acumen. On the other hand, you might have a great heart surgeon, but if that person has a long track record of his or her words not matching their deeds, you don't want me to crack open your chest, right? You got to have both. They're two sides to the same coin. There's the character side and there's the competence side. Let me just kind of speak to it from and then I want to just make a comment. So I've made a note, so don't let me forget that on your experience in the public sector. But this is my experience, as I have worked with organizations across the world. I have seen little pockets of extraordinary cultures where they've developed their leaders, and it's really extraordinary. But I haven't seen is a wildfire breakout. And why do we not see more? Because we all talk about it. And as Deloitte said, because it's hard, right? But when I have seen it happen, there are four things that address, I think, both sides to the coin, but maybe more on the competence side that you just addressed. Number one, you use the word deliberate. I love that. It has to be a deliberate choice. I love the fact that, as Spencer, you were on that plane, you had all those people coming to a conference, and you sort of back of the napkin calculate the cost of that, and it's an astronomical amount. Why would an organization make that investment? And the answer is because they say, we are committed to getting better. We're committed to being better. That's the first thing that I've seen where great organizational leadership cultures exist from the very top of the organization, from the CEO and the chairman on down, the executive team. They say, we choose to be intentional about it. You can't just give lip service. You can't just talk about it. You have to do it and invest time and resources and money to do it. It will. I'm not telling you that it has not ever happened, but I'm telling you in 3.5 decades, 35 years of working with executives, I have never seen a great enduring culture happen by accident. It is always a deliberate creation, and it takes time and effort and commitment from the top. That's the first thing. The second thing, Christian, is that you've got to have some kind of organizing model. You got to have some kind of framework that puts all the pieces together. My years at Franklin Covey, that's one of the things that Franklin Covey is just so brilliant at, is creating these powerful frameworks that engage, that organize, and other organizations do. You think about the quest that every person on the world has, every adult on the world has at New Year's, is to lose weight, right? And there's a lot of ways of losing weight, a lot of different diets. Well, there's a lot of good ones. Pick one, pick a framework, and engage with it, right? Maybe that's a bad analogy, but the point is you got to have some kind of organizing model. Number three, that organizing model has to introduce language and vocabulary and skills and process and tools so that we can engage with each other. We can talk about it. We can challenge each other. We can get better. And number four, this is what I've seen in great organizations, that there is modeling of the behavior. And I'm sure you've both been part of an organization in the past where the leader has stood up and said, everybody behave this way. And then he or she, the leader, behaves this way. And the cataclysmically devastating impact of not modeling the behavior. So those are four things that I would say we've got to be deliberate about developing, about getting better, about learning, about refining our competence, refining our technical acumen, about being better leaders, not just on the character side, but on the competence side as well, and engage around frameworks and learning, and that introduces language and process that challenges us. And then we've got to model it. I said earlier that culture is the collective behavior of your people, right? It's what the majority of the people do the majority of the time. If I'm the fly on the wall in your organization, it's what I see, and I can't get into your head, I can't get into your heart. It's what I see people doing, right? It's the behaviors. But Ram Shriram, who's a brilliant author, one of our most prolific authors, and an extraordinary man and great career, put a finer point on it. He said, leadership is really, he said, culture really is the collective behavior of your leaders. You want to change your culture, you start first with your leaders, because then they have the influence on everyone else. So, good question. It is both character and it is also competence. It's both, right? And Christian, if it's okay, can I just make one statement about public sector? Because that's sort of your professional experience right now. And in addition to a rich and varied background, I've spent a lot of my career working with governments across the world at all levels, federal, state, local, and international. And here's what I've learned. The principles of leadership apply everywhere. One of my favorite authors is Jim Collins, and I'm sure you've read and reread like I have, Good to Great and Built to Last. And in Good to Great, Jim talks about, the comparison of these 20 organizations with other organizations and what made some great and others less than great, and identified these great leadership principles. He wrote a chapter in that book that didn't get in the book, but he published it separately as a monograph. And just a separate chapter, and it's called Good to Great in the Social Sector. I would refer to it as the public sector. And basically his point is this: all of these leadership principles that we've talked about that apply in the for-profit world, in our businesses, in all that we're doing, also apply in our public service. The difference is one is driving towards a financial objective, and the other is driving towards mission accomplishment. So the end that we're chasing might be a little bit different, but how we go there, how we develop our leaders is really the same. The principles have universal application. So anyway, thanks for listening.
It's interesting, Shawn, the kind of the father of Singapore, if you will, is, I think his name is Lee Kuan Yew. really took that to heart, and his approach to government was we want to get the best and brightest, and we want to make this a place where they thrive. And so, and they're really quite an interesting study in government if you look at that small country. But we have several comments on LinkedIn that are not showing up like they usually do, and I just went and looked. Christian, I'm just going to share a couple. This is the CEO of CloudHire, Sufayan. He says, fascinating insights on trust-driven cultures. Have you seen, Shawn, how trust directly impacts talent retention and team dynamics?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great one to study because there's great empirical data that shows that. I mean, I believe, first of all, I want to give credit and attribution to Stephen M. R. Covey, who is one of my dearest friends and the author of the New York Times bestselling book, The Speed of Trust. In fact, I'll be with Stephen tomorrow. And he makes this bold assertion that I absolutely stand by. He said, of all of the competencies that a leader possesses, and there are a lot, and Christian, we just talked about, you've got to develop those competencies. You got to get better. You got to work at your craft. You've got to be good on the technical side as well as the people side. Of all of the competencies that a leader needs to possess, he says the number one is the ability to create and sustain a culture of trust. Where trust is evident, everything is accelerated. Everything moves faster. And where it's absent, everything is encumbered and just costs more. So where it's there, everything's faster and drives out cost. Where it's not there, everything takes longer and costs increase. It's a very, very simple formula that I have seen and experienced. And if you want evidence of that, and evidence of how it impacts all kinds of metrics, including retention of your great people, think about your own experience. Think about what it feels like to operate in an environment where trust is toxic. Let's say it's not just bad, it's toxic. And what does that feel like? And think about what percentage of your waking life you spend working or thinking about work. And often when I ask people to describe that, it's to describe what it feels like, they come back with these words like, I feel oppressed, I feel threatened, I feel unsafe, I feel demoralized. I'm like, listen to your words, listen to what you're saying, and think about how much of your waking life. I'll often ask people if I have a daughter and now a grandson who loves Harry Potter. My little 8-year-old grandson, he's reading with his dad the books at night, and it's so cute. And he's this rough and tumble little guy, but now he's learning the magic of reading of books. And I ask him what the name of the prison in Harry Potter land. It's Azkaban, right? The name of the guards, they're the Dementors. And I'll ask people in the book in Harry Potter, what happens when a Dementor gives you a kiss? And their response, it sucks your soul. I think that's a metaphor for what it feels like to work in that kind of toxic environment. It is a soul-sucking experience. And we've all had aspects of that. So you want evidence, just go back to your own experience. Conversely, think about what it feels like to work in an environment where trust is not just good, it's world-class. It's amazing. Not perfect, because nothing's perfect, but it's amazing. And people will say to me, well, it's empowering. It captures my best, innovation, the best thinking. It's safe to make a mistake, and we all learn, and we all get better, and I want to give my best. Peter Senge wrote a book several years ago entitled The Fifth Discipline, and I was reading it one time, and it's like these words jumped off the page to me. Something to this effect. He said, when you ask people what it feels like to be part of a great team, the title of this podcast is Teamwork a Better Way. What it feels like to be part of that great team, he said, it captures your best, captures what I call your shower time. You're getting ready in the morning, you're thinking about your team. And he said, for some people, when they leave that experience, they spend the rest of their lives trying to find ways to recapture that. It just is so
Christian
meaningful.
talked about that being on that 2002 Olympic committee, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was amazing. It was an
I have a
amazing
former
experience.
colleague who was part of that, and she couldn't stop talking about how meaningful that was.
Christian actually started a podcast just to capture a lot of those stories about that experience. So,
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
extraordinary.
I interviewed 100 of my coworkers, and this is during the pandemic. So we had
Yeah.
time, right? And to a person, they all would say how amazing it was to work there. And so you're absolutely right. I realize we're up against it. We've gone almost an hour. Spencer, I don't know if we have any other comments from other
well,
people who
we
chimed
have a
in.
couple more comments. Just one, and this is from Nils Bundy. I don't know if you know Nils, CEO and co-founder of Ask Radar AI. Says, "What's the secret sauce that turns trust into talent? I'm thrilled to see leaders focusing on culture as the foundation for success." I think we've kind of answered that, but if there's anything else you want to say to speak to that.
I just underscore what I said before. It doesn't happen by accident. It is not a magical creation. It is a deliberate creation. You got to put the stake in the ground and say this matters, and it's got to start from the top. And then having a framework to help facilitate that is so vital.
I think Stephen ought to write a book called The ROI of Trust.
Yeah, yeah, because it's there. It's there, and it again. We can cite lots of examples. I can cite them in my own business, how it is more than double, tripled our top line, but the bottom line, has grown exponentially because of trust,
Thank you.
right? Everyone participating in this and everyone listening, just go to your own experience and draw from your experience, and the ROI of trust.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. Well, this has been such an enlightening conversation, super educational for me, inspiring. Shawn, I'm sure that people who are going to be listening to this, they're going to want to learn more about this from you. So, for viewers, listeners who want to connect with you in some way, learn more about the things that you do, how you could potentially help their organizations or them individually, what's the best way for them to reach out and contact?
Just connect with me on LinkedIn, send me a message, and I'll be happy to respond.
All right,
Shawn
fantastic.
Moon, LinkedIn.
Well, look, folks, look up Shawn Moon. And Spencer, you've spent decades helping teams become high-performing teams. And if people want to learn more about the work that you do to help organizations develop optimized teams, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Find me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way. Get messages every day. And Christian, Shawn, every time I bring someone on, they just get to discover how brilliant he is. And now you know.
Absolutely.
Isn't he
I do
great?
know.
So the world needs to find you,
have
friend.
I have to tell you both. I'm elevated by being having this association. So thank you. It's such a privilege and I'm better because of you. So thank you.
Oh, that's very kind. And Christian, how do they find you, my friend?
Well, let's just put 3 plugs in for LinkedIn. Yeah, just look me up on LinkedIn. Christian, I'd be happy to have a conversation with anyone. And listeners and viewers, thank you for taking an hour out of your day to join us on this journey. We really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe to our podcast, and we'll catch you again soon.